Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And over the last year, of course, I've done a lot of searching for those very memos. What a year it's been! Can you believe it's almost over? I can't. In fact, I'm panicking. I'm panicking so much that I'm bringing to you today a video displaying the 10 most popular Lost in the Pond videos of the year. That's right, the videos that you chose to watch more than any other in the land. Not in the land, just in the land of Lost in the Pond. It would be great if it was in the land, because then I'd be in the stratosphere. What does that mean? Don't know. Anyway, I will unveil those to you here in just a second, and as I do, let me know in the comments below if you remember these videos and which is your favourite. I suspect some of you might remember the first two videos on this list because they were published during Vlogmas. Here's an interesting one. How do you pronounce ant? As in, you know, your auntie. Some people in the United Kingdom would say aunt. I do if I want to sound smart. But if I'm rushing things, I say ant. Because that's the northern in me. And the options, of course, with the vowel, as in R, or to sound like ant. It's that. So my aunt sounds like an ant. She's not as strong as an ant. I've continued to be happily surprised by life in the brave new world, but there was a time shortly before moving here that I filled my head with lies. Becoming Americanized, at least in the eyes of those Brits you left behind, is somehow the ultimate sin. Once you move away, don't start talking like a Yank, joked approximately all of my friends before I'd even packed my first suitcase. Always remember that it's football, not soccer. The problem, if you can call it a problem, is that not only do we British inherit various Americanisms, but the process of doing so is utterly unavoidable. Picture, if you will, the confusion that would arise if I always refer to soccer, a term actually coined in England, as football when in the company of Americans, especially in light of the popular US sport of the same name. Of course, such broad modification to our vernacular could have interesting consequences if the next entry ever ceased to be a lie. Not just a misspelt P.G. Wodehouse character, and not just a magic box of mispronunciations. Worcester, Massachusetts is a city of 180,000 people, was incorporated as such in 1848, and was named after the city in the West Midlands. And if these nomenclatural similarities were not enough, Worcester, Massachusetts was chosen in 1731 as the Shire town of Worcester County, where it still serves as the county seat to this very day. Over on the other side of the pond, in the year 927 AD, the county of Worcestershire was rolled up into the unified kingdom of England, and the city of Worcester remains there more than a millennium after. And while the word Worcester, not to mention Worcestershire, is written quite differently from how it's spoken, at least both countries remain consistent on the spelling, unlike our next entry. For so many reasons, the 17-year-old version of myself would never have imagined that he'd one day utter the sentence immediately following this one. Shortly after moving to the US, an American friend of mine was diagnosed with a mysterious-sounding viral disease. The doctor says I have mono, she reported at the time. It's causing the lymph nodes in my neck to swell. She had a very deep voice, apparently. Now, aside from imagining just how bad this mono must have been, I couldn't help but wonder two things. Number one, mono must have been extremely rare, I'd never heard of it. And two, stereo must have been twice as bad. But as it turns out, mono is not only pretty common, but it's precisely what the British call glandular fever. So all of the fears that I had for my friend's health could have been significantly alleviated if somebody had simply told me, "Your friend is gonna be fine, she just kissed the wrong boy." Now, there's one huge contributing factor as to why these Amtrak trains, these trains owned by Amtrak, don't reach their top speeds of that 177 kilometers per hour, and that's because the tracks that Amtrak utilizes are not owned by Amtrak, they're owned by freight companies. There are 8 major freight companies in the United States, and the amount of tracks that those freight companies use is actually far more expansive than the map that I just showed you for passenger rail only. In fact, this map, which looks more like the human circulatory system, paints the picture of just how dominant freight trains are in the United States. According to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, there are more than 93,000 miles of freight train track in the United States. And like I said, that map that I showed you before with all of the Amtrak routes, those tracks are owned by the freight companies. So Amtrak actually has to prioritize the routes of these freight trains before it can move its trains along. So often you will find yourself on a train that gets stuck on tracks for over an hour while another freight train is trying to move through. And you just sit there and have to wait for that to finish. Over time, you do start adopting some of the everyday terms that Americans might use. I don't know if it's to avoid confusion or anything like that, or if it's just sort of after hearing it repetitively from other people, you do take it on, and it's almost unavoidable. Not that I wish to avoid it. I have no plans to avoid adopting American English, but occasionally it is going to happen that you do adopt these American terms because it's your new life. You know, it is the new language, the lingua franca with which you've become familiar. And that's true of other everyday activities like going to the bank. You know, I say checking account now instead of current account. Liquor store instead of off license. You know, not to suggest that I drink alcohol every day. Don't get that impression, although I rather give you that impression. I'm just going to say it, my sincerest apologies to the people of the Silver State. You care deeply about your state pronunciation, and for that I commend and fear you. The truth is, I, along with millions of others, have been saying it wrong for decades, at least according to the locals. We couldn't help it, we didn't know any better. I mean, we took the example of other Spanish-derived words like, you know, avocado or piñata or tomato. Actually, that last one is a bad example. And assumed that your state just followed the same rule, that the second vowel was equal to that in tostada, you know, Nevada. But I wasn't born yesterday. In both Britain and America, it's perfectly normal for the rules of articulation to go out of the window, and I, for one, welcome that. So, from this day on, I vow to the people of Nevada that I will pronounce it Nevada. What's that? There's a city in Iowa with the same name. It's pronounced Nevada. I give up. So speaking of Indianapolis, Indianapolis is kind of a rarity almost in the United States in that it is the most populated city in the state and is also a capital city. Often that's not the case. It's certainly not the case here in Illinois. Chicago is by far and away the most populated city, or should I say populous city in Illinois, but not the capital. That would be Springfield. And same with New York, okay? So New York City is not the capital city. Albany is, and so on and so forth. Las Vegas is not the capital of Nevada. That is Carson City. You can go to California, you would think LA, right? No, not at all. It is Sacramento. So in many cases these cities are not capitals, but also something that you will note is that throughout American history, a lot of the capital cities dotted around each of the states, or in the past around the territories, they've changed over time. They haven't always stayed the same capital depending on the state or region that we're talking about. And that's quite an interesting point, right? So I'm not sure that all prejudice toward Americans today is even tied to history. In fact, to its detriment, it often ignores it. In the case of language, actually, quite often, as I've pointed out before, we ignore sort of the historical patterns behind language and how Americanisms came about from Britishisms. You know, I've talked before about the word soccer having been coined actually in England, if you want to talk about lexicon. The same is true of certain spellings of words. Let's look at aluminum. We say and write aluminium back in the UK, and you say aluminum here. Well, aluminum was previously in use in the UK and was debated back and forth between members of the science circle there as to which one we should go with. And then similarly, when we're talking about pronunciation, a lot of Americans have a tendency to drop the H on herb, whereas the British tend to keep it, but that was not always the case. We started out by dropping the H on herb because of the French tendency to do so, just as we do with the words honour and hour and things of that ilk. But we stopped doing that just because it was becoming quite a class issue. If you were doing that in the UK, you were seen as unintelligent at one point. That memo never got spread over here in the United States, so they dropped it. For the first 26 years of my life, the word used to describe a physiological dependence on something like sugar or painkillers or my videos was the word addictive. In fact, it still is, but for some Americans, and I do stress the word some, that particular adjective isn't an adjective at all, but a verb, or at least it was. You see, the word addicting appears in countless books from the turn of the 19th century, usually in the sense of giving one's assent to something. And admittedly, it wasn't just exclusive to American English text. Indeed, here it is showing up in a London print of Samuel Johnson's The Plan of an English Dictionary, again in the previously abundant verb form. And then that abundancy dissipated, which makes me sound like a weather presenter. And the word, now as an adjective, did not see such widespread use in print until after World War II. Curiously, its re-emergence occurred at almost exactly the same time that the word addictive was entering English. And that's because the two words, particularly in American English, were thereafter used interchangeably. Of course, graphs such as these only tell part of the story. The word addicting in literary circles is probably considered informal usage, so it's less likely to appear in print than addictive. The jury then is still out on spoken instances of the word addicting, but I will tell you from personal experience that I only encountered it myself after moving to America's Midwest. That's it for this YouTube rewind. That's not what that means, is it? I mean, this is my own YouTube rewind, and I hope you enjoyed looking back at those snippets. If you enjoyed these snippets and you haven't seen some of these videos, why not click on the links below? I've linked to all of the videos in the description box below so that you can watch these in their entirety. Thank you again for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Once again, a big shout out to all my patrons who make these videos possible. Without you, none of it would be, from the writing to the research to the reruns. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Anyone who does so can get access to my secret live stream, the next one of course coming in January, and anybody that pledges $5 or more a month will get access to not only that, but my secret podcast and more. Until next time, until tomorrow, have a wonderful Christmas Eve. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.